This is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous good-looking friends. Today, we turn to a dramatic twist in what was sold to the public as Prince Harry's righteous battle against alleged press misconduct. But recent developments raise serious questions about the integrity of the evidence and the tactics used by Harry and his legal operatives. Now, at the center of this storm is Gavin Burrows. He's a private investigator whose testimony has been touted as a cornerstone of the lawsuit against the Daily Mail's publisher, Associated Newspapers Limited. Claimants, including Prince Harry, Sir Elton John, Elizabeth Hurley, and others, claim Burrows had admitted to illegal surveillance activities on behalf of the newspaper group. That purported confession was presented as a smoking gun, pointing to voicemail hacking, bugging of landlines, and other invasions of privacy. But in a stunning reversal, Burrows told the High Court that the statement lodged by Harry's legal team was false and that his signature on it was forged. He said the document contained language that was not his and that the accounts attributed to him simply did not reflect reality. Now, just days before the scheduled start of the trial, the court heard that Burrows has expressed concern for his safety and said he felt intimidated after being contacted in a way he perceived as threatening in the run-up to giving evidence. Now, according to this article from The Telegraph, it says here, Mr. Burrows is so fearful for his safety that he does not want the parties involved to know his whereabouts and has applied to give evidence remotely, with his location concealed even from lawyers. Tom Poole, for Mr. Burrows, said the private investigator had always been fully willing to give evidence voluntarily, but is concerned that by doing so, he puts himself at personal risk. He added, he was contacted yesterday afternoon by Byline Times, which he understands works in close connection with the claimant's legal representatives. He rightly or wrongly has interpreted the email, which was saying that they are going to be publishing an article about him today. He has interpreted that, rightly or wrongly, as a blatant attempt to intimidate him at the commencement of trial before he is due to give evidence. It has previously been alleged that Byline Investigates, a sister publication, has been used to advance the claimant's arguments since before litigation even began. I'm going to go ahead and call bullshit on Byline Times because when you go to their website and you look for articles that have been published about this court case, there's nothing since last year. The same thing with Byline Investigates. In fact, Byline Investigates, their last article, especially when you just go to the website, their homepage shows their last article was from 2024. So no doubt, I totally believe that there was intimidation. I mean, this is not the first time we've heard of Harry bullying people. So now this is a perfect example showing everybody how the media picks and chooses what to amplify and what to not talk about. You do realize that this was raised back in 2023, and I had covered this in such detail that Gavin Burrows himself had reposted parts of my video. Now I'm going to go ahead and put that same video into this video so everybody can understand what was going on at that time. Gavin Burrows was upfront in 2023 stating that he said his signature was forged. He also was able to prove that it was impossible for him to sign whatever documents that Harry and his team had submitted. This video also goes into the background of the relationship between Graham Johnson and Gavin Burrows, as well as Christine Hart. These are very important background details because it goes to the core credibility of the entire case. Harry's legal strategy has leaned heavily on private investigators' testimonies to link A&L to unlawful practices like the voicemail hacking, landline bugging, and covert surveillance. But if the statement used to support those allegations wasn't genuinely written or signed by Gavin Burrows, not only does it cast a long shadow over the entire lawsuit, but it collapses Prince Harry's case. Which is why I never understood how this case moved forward, considering Gavin Burrows was upfront from the very beginning about it. And this is why I say, look at how the media is used to amplify certain narratives and then keep others silent, which is what went on here. And now this is coming right back up, probably because Associated News is raising this fact. It's now getting more traction. But this is what I said 2 years ago when this was going on.
When you talk about Harry and Meghan, you talk about the fact that they're globally recognized, the fact that they can do an awful lot in the charity sphere if we get across the noise that we've had over the last couple of years.
And this is where millions will emphatically disagree with this guy, because it's not about them doing charity work to make an impact. It's about using that Archwell public charity as a front in order to push their political agenda, which is divisive, destructive, and only serving their self-interests, not for the good of mankind. Which now raises the question about why are journalists not talking about Gavin Burrows' very clear admission of his signature being forged on these original witness statements. So on the second day of this court hearing, everything was thrown upside down. And that was Gavin Burrows' admission that he did not sign those statements that were being produced saying that, yes, the Daily Mail had commissioned him to unlawfully do investigative work on, all the people in this court case. So Harry, Elton John, Baroness Lawrence. And naturally, this admission perplexed many people because Gavin Burrows really was the star witness in all of this, especially for Harry. And a lot of people started to attack Gavin Burrows by saying, well, why did you change your statement to saying that the Daily Mail never commissioned you in the first place? And that was not the case. Now, before all of this broke, when I had been looking at the Levinson report and trying to understand what this case was about, I did go to his Twitter page and saw these tweets that made absolutely no sense whatsoever. So on March 18th, he's tweeting out that the BBC discussed him, that the BBC should hang their heads in shame. People like Graham Johnson belong behind bars. Again, on the same day, paying witnesses, that's an imprisonable offense. Even Harris, a greedy con artist. Then he tweets again on the 21st saying criminal investigation into hacked of board claimants, lawyers, and researchers, exaggerated, embellished, doctored evidence, bribes. At this point, no idea what is being discussed here. And back when he tweeted this was before the case even got started. So nobody really knew what he was talking about. And thanks to Paula M., she was the one who yesterday was the first to talk about this on her channel. And it piqued my interest. And when I looked into it and saw that now Gavin Burrows had pinned this article that was written, it now all made sense. Absolutely 100%. The media needs to be talking about this because it is a serious situation. So this article apparently is from a news organization called The Upsetter. I've never heard of it before, but upon looking at it, this is what they're about. The Upsetter is not part of any lobby of journalists allowed to talk to the police, spooks, and politicians. The Upsetter is not party political or clubbable. It is self-financed and independent of media organizations, law firms, private investigators, NGOs, think tanks, law enforcement, and regulators to bring unvarnished news about how they all play the game. So there were 2 anonymous articles that were written about this brewing scandal with the network of lawyers involved with trying to sue A&L. And then you have the private investigators, which you have Gavin Burrows and another gentleman who was supposed to be turning clean, but apparently he's still corrupt, by the name of Graham Johnson. So this guy, Graham Johnson, had been around the circuit during the time the phone hacking scandal was around. He was a journalist for these tabloids and also had engaged in the same practices and behaviors with trying to get information. So then in December of 2014, this guy Johnson was given a 2-month suspended sentence for phone hacking. So long story short, this guy was prancing around trying to look like he turned over a new leaf and started to work with Byline Investigates, as well as Hacked Off, which was an organization that was supported by the actor Hugh Grant. So Hugh Grant was also exposed in this hacking scandal, meaning that he was affected, and since then has taken up this campaign of trying to seek justice for a free and accountable press. Hence, this nonprofit organization was formed. And being that this guy, Graham Johnson, went to prison, no newspaper was going to touch him again. So it appears that he was trying to look like he was turning a new leaf and trying now to help these organizations uncover and expose some of the dirty tactics that happened within the media. So according to Upsetter, is that he had been partnering with Byline Investigates and writing these articles, as well as supporting Hugh Grant's campaign, hence being seen as somebody who really has flipped and is now trying to champion and help for better journalism. So in 2018, Gavin Burrows is contacted by this guy, Graham Johnson, and they started to discuss various projects. Among them were books and projects. And they also talked about the litigation against newspapers for what the courts called unlawful information gathering. Now, keep in mind that in 2018, that's when Meghan and Harry married. And then subsequently, by October 2018, that's when everything started to unravel with the newspapers, such as Meghan made Kate cry and the story about the tiara. Things started to leak. So Graham Johnson, after connecting with Gavin Burrows, introduces him to a lawyer by the name of Anjali Sangani. So according to this article by the Upsetter dated January 3rd, he confirms that he introduced Gavin to this lawyer, but he didn't state what the relationship was, and he also didn't say that she wanted to meet a key private investigator willing to talk about work for the Mail. What follows next is quite interesting that I think should be open for investigation, and it says, Burrows claims he was instructed by Sangani to conduct litigation research into the Daily Mail, one of his former clients. Then it says the well-placed source says this is inaccurate and Burrow is assisting the network of lawyers who declined to comment. So right there, you notice that something's fishy. Anyhow, the working relationship between Johnson and Burrows got closer, and they started to work on a book in which Gavin was writing about the dark arts for the media. And it was Johnson that brought in Gavin Burrows to do this documentary, The Princess and the Press, in which the BBC had Graham Johnson on as a consultant, which is quite interesting, and I'll explain that in a second. So back to the story, the relationship between Johnson and Gavin Burrows started to sour at the beginning of 2022. So the net of it, according to Burrows, is that he was a con man and he just couldn't trust him. So allegedly, it had something to do around the contract and the rights to the book that was being written. Somehow they got into some type of altercation in which, so by summer 22, Gavin Burrows took the first steps towards suing Graham Johnson and the publishing company Yellow Press. And it was for the claim for breach of contract. So I'm not going to get into the beef that Gavin has with Graham Johnson. What we have to understand is that Graham Johnson was setting up this grift in order to take advantage of this conglomerate in litigations, because there have been so many cases that have been settled out of court based off of getting information in this manner. Now they decided that they were going to make this super mega claim, which is where we have Elton John and we have Harry and Elizabeth Hurley and Baroness Lawrence all coming together. And I kid you not, when I saw and read this name, Anjali Sangani, I remember back in October of 2022 when this case first was announced and everybody was like, what? Now there's like 7 people in a lawsuit. I remember specifically this article. And sure enough, Anjali Sangani is representing Elton John and David Furnish in this lawsuit. As you can see, David Sherborne is listed here. Now you have to wonder, is David Sherborne a part of this network that is involved with Graham Johnson? So now that you know the background to this, we can now go back to this post that Gavin put up of this article that was written on Upsetter dated March 17th. And what this article revealed was the BBC's involvement of being in bed with Graham Johnson and manipulating this whole scenario. So this super claim that was being brought against Emil was going to be the BBC's next project with Graham Johnson. So Gavin Burrows realizes that Graham Johnson's modus operandi was to ask private investigators to make an affidavit of what they've done for the various tabloids. And I believe that this is how they convinced Baroness Lawrence to be a part of this lawsuit. And I do believe also that Meghan and Harry were fully aware of the strategy and what they were trying to do. And the only reason why I say that, because all the projects that they were working on overlapped with one another. So for instance, in the Shitflix mockumentary series that these two did, in episode 3, where they were leading up to the tale of their wedding, they managed to manipulate, once again, the audience by telling this narrative of how Meghan was so hunted by the paparazzi and all the articles about her and the racist British media. This was the episode where they were sticking in some of the bullet points that were going to be featured into this case.
There was excitement leading up to the wedding, but she also had to contend with everybody else.
So, as you can see here, they're referencing an article, but what you'll notice is that this article didn't come out till 2021.
It's amazing what people will do when offered a huge amount of money.
So the article that they're referring to is this article from the New York Times, in which I will bet money that Meghan and Harry paid to have put in there, dated March 18, 2021. We know for a fact that the New York Times is a media outlet that supports Meghan and Harry's lies by pushing out their propaganda. Their PR firm, Sunshine Sachs at the time, was hooking all of this up. Who could forget the lies supported in the myth carriage? Anyway, in this article, the private eye, Daniel Portley Hanks, otherwise known as Dano, is featured, talking about his job when he had to investigate the details about Markle's background. So why does this guy look so familiar? That's because he was featured in the BBC, The Princess, and the Press, regurgitating the same damn story. Yes, the same documentary series that Graham Johnson was a consultant on. You bet your bottom dollar that Meghan and Harry knew what they were doing. And there you can see Graham Johnson's name as the hacking consultant in the documentary credits for BBC. But going back to the Shitflix series mockumentary, they decide to flash these headlines across. Notice
this idea that
who the organization they focus on. Yes, that's Hacked Off. The organization that is in bed with Graham Johnson. But let's twist the knife further, as we know that Meghan and Harry love to exploit others. So in this Shitflix series, they make a point to clearly talk about Baroness Lawrence.
Harry and Meghan Markle will attend a special memorial later to mark the 25th anniversary of the death of Stephen Lawrence.
An 18-year-old boy has been stabbed to death as he waited for a bus with a friend in southeast
Not far
London.
away, he and a friend were approached by a gang of up to half a dozen white
stabbed
youths.
by a group of white thugs in an unprovoked rape.
It was such an egregious, such an appalling, such a disturbing case that it became too difficult to ignore.
So this horrible tragedy is being featured in this Shitflix series to do two things. One, to solidify Meghan as the victim of racism in the UK, because they keep emphasizing how racist the British people are. And two, to also associate Harry with Baroness Lawrence on this tragedy. Because in the lawsuit, it will pull on the heartstrings because Meghan is a black woman and she was subjected to this kind of cruel, intrusive behavior. Whoever is behind this, no doubt, Meghan and Harry fully knew what they were getting into. And they used this tragedy and exploited it for their own selfish gain.
Hanging over this memorial, the terrible fact that only 2 of Stephen's killers have been brought to justice.
A quarter of a century later, we can only imagine the man who Stephen would have become.
And was this a coincidence? Definitely not. And shame on Meghan and Harry. I really do hope that the Daily Mail presses criminal charges, or somebody press criminal charges to get to the bottom of this, because whoever forged needs to be prosecuted. And those that were part of planning this litigation, super mega lawsuit, be exposed. So Russell Myers, this is a story more worthy than blowing smoke up Meghan and Harry's asses. And to be honest, I actually believe Gavin. He's the type of guy that you get exactly what you pay for and what is asked. And he will do right by you as long as you do right by him. And in this case, it sounds like Graham Johnson screwed him over, not only from a relationship perspective, but also from a monetary perspective, in which you don't mess with that. So now what we're seeing in the media is Harry's team scrambling to, I'm guessing, come up with a new narrative, because Harry's case does fall flat because Gavin Burrows was the star witness. Now, hopefully from this example, you can see how controlled Harry's PR team has the media, because the stories about Harry and his team intimidating Gavin Burrows is getting suppressed to the bottom, while headlines of Harry giving evidence in lawsuit floats to the top. Which now brings me to this. I posted this yesterday up on X when it was announced that Harry was going to be giving evidence in this lawsuit next week. Now, could it be that Harry and his legal team realized that Gavin Burrows wasn't going to play along with this scam? Most likely. Now, could it be that they had to scrap Plan A with Gavin Burrows and move on to another plan, Plan B, which could involve Caroline Graham and Detective Dano? You know, Detective Dano from California, who stalked, allegedly, the Markles, even though the Markles had been working with Caroline Graham from the very beginning. And how special that Dano Hanks has a spotlight on the homepage of Byline Investigates. Now, many of you know that last month I was highly suspicious about these back-to-back articles Caroline Graham was putting out about Thomas Markle Sr. and this alleged amputation he had, citing that Caroline Graham has been a part of this Markle scam from the very beginning. Let's not forget that she was responsible for the article that allegedly destroyed the relationship between Meghan and her dad. And then add in private investigator, ex-CIA Detective Dano coming into the mix in 2016 with The Sun, the same newspaper that Samantha Markle had her first interview all lined up and ready to go as soon as it was announced that Harry and Meghan were dating. And what a small world that Caroline Graham regularly commissioned Detective Dano Hanks for unlawfully obtained information, including about the royal family, even though he lives in California. But now we're supposed to believe that he's turned over a new leaf, just like Graham Johnson, and is helping Harry seek justice against this newspaper. Okay, there's a possibility, and I'm just speculating, that this evidence now that Harry is going to submit, because what else does he have, is going to involve Caroline Graham and her relationship with the Markles and the whole saga of Meghan trying to get a letter to her dad. I mean, there's a reason why, when all of this was going down, Meghan opens her mouth and says, oh, it's an ethical breach to have Caroline Graham sitting there. So I think there's a high possibility that Caroline Graham is now part of the plan. And all that drama that the Markle operatives had caused last month was done for a reason. You know, now is the time to put your common sense hat on and ask yourself this question. Why is it the Markles have gone radio silent, especially after the bombshell of that apology from the journalist who said that, yeah, she's sorry that she said that Doria went to prison and that, yes, her mother was the one to raise her. Yeah, and for those that are going to defend the Markles and say that, oh, Meghan allegedly sent a cease and desist, I don't buy it. And the reason why I don't buy it is because we're 8 years now into this, And now she's deciding to send a cease and desist when so much has been said. Does anybody believe that Samantha Markle, of all people, would just all of a sudden shut up? Especially if allegedly it was the truth that was being said? You have to wonder, why is it that they have been radio silent about this one thing? And for all those anti-Meghan Markle influencers that are out there that are emotionally attached to these people, I can't figure it out. Either you're willfully ignoring it and not able to comprehend that you've been lied to, or somehow you're involved with this. But if you can't see it now, in the many different ways and the many instances that have been presented by several people now that they have lied, it's really now up to the individual to decide what to believe and what not to believe. The facts are there. The question now becomes, how much longer are you going to allow these people to continue to keep manipulating and deceiving everyone? It's going to be really interesting next week to see what evidence Harry now plans on bringing forward in this lawsuit, because obviously the evidence that he has with Gavin Burrows needs to be scrapped. Otherwise, somebody is going to be going to jail. But what do you guys think? Definitely leave your thoughts below. As always, I will be back with more content, but until then, please be safe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!
It was such a fraud.